What's up, pod pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are checking out Podcasting Business School. This is the place where I teach podcasters how to love their show like a hobby, but build it like a business. If you are into some podcasting tips on how to grow your brand, how to grow your audience engagement, how to monetize and grow your income, how to get more downloads, you're in the right place. Today, we're talking Instagram. And as you know, Instagram is one of my favorite places to nerd out on and really connect with you all. A lot of you have either met me on the podcast and we connect on Instagram, or we meet on Instagram and you get into my podcast. So I love learning ways to optimize. And my other new social media love is Clubhouse. And one of the first Clubhouse rooms that I was a mod on, this woman, Marti, comes on and blew me away with her Instagram tips. I was like, Angie, will you please come on the podcast and drop some Instagram knowledge? So Angie is here today. You all know I figure out weird things on Instagram. Like I'm really good at reels, but it's not like the way that everyone else does reels. I'm missing a lot of the basics of the platform that I know will help me level up and help you guys level up. And Angie has that knowledge in spades. So Angie, welcome to Podcasting Business School.
Thanks so much, Adam. Really happy to be here. And I love talking about Instagram, as you know, because you've met me on Clubhouse, and I do a lot of social media talking when it comes to Instagram and any other kind of social media. I think it's really important because the majority of people are just like you, right? They don't know how to navigate these social media platforms in the technical sense. You navigate it, you learn as you go, you maybe learn a few tips and tricks, and you say to yourself, oh, I've got this. But there's a lot of stuff that maybe you don't know, that you haven't researched, or you're not sure of. There's a lot of myths out there. So I like to come on and offer sort of the more method-based tips and advice for other people to be able to navigate Instagram effectively too.
And you're a scientist by trade. So you have that like data mindset of, all right, what is the data actually telling us? Which I am not that way. I'm kind of like, let's look at some trends and see what my friends are doing and see what these famous people are doing. But I love your data-driven approach. So I would love to start off with the tip that really that you gave me. And I went to my profile instantly and changed one thing. So you were like, hey, normally people have your handle or whatever. Mine's Podcasting Business School. And then they list their name, Adam Shibley. And you're like, what you should do is have your first name and then list, something that's very keyword friendly. Exactly. So I put Adam Podcasting Tips and a few little emojis in there. And people started finding me because of that. Like it started happening. Yeah. But I always ask people where they found me. So can you explain, let's just start off with that tip, why that works and why people should be changing their name slot to something that's searchable?
Yeah, of course. This is actually really a really good tip if you're starting off. It's sort of like a profile optimization tip that you can do. But the idea is that your handle, which is, for example, and then whatever is after that. So, for example, in my case, it's where is Angie? And there's a lot of different, handles out there. Your handle is searchable. So every word that's within your handle is searchable on the Instagram search bar. So if people go into Instagram and they go to the Explore page and they want to search something and they type in a word that is within your handle, you're going to pop up. And what people don't know is that your handle and your name are searchable. So your name is that little space underneath your profile picture where people normally write, Adam Schaubel or their first and last name. And that field is also searchable. So what I tell people, and this happens a lot, is most of the time people put the same information in their handle and in their name. And the thing is, that's like valuable space, right? Because you don't have a lot of characters in your handle or in your name. I believe the maximum is 30 characters. So that's not a lot to work with. And you need to use them effectively. Because if you want to be found for podcasting, for example, and you don't have the word podcast within your name or your handle, you're already limiting, your searchability on the platform. So you want to find your keywords, the ones that you want to implement, that you want to be searchable for, and you want to put them in that field. So what I suggest is what you were saying. In your name, I would put, a name, because you do want people to be able to have something to hold on to. It gives it that personal touch that they can refer to. And then you want to put your keywords. So for example, in your case, it might be podcasting tips. In my case, it's travel and community, because those are the things that I want to be searched for. So that's a really good way to start off optimizing your profile.
And it made so much sense once you described it. I was like, wow, this, and I know I saw a few of my friends that were on there that by the end of the room, they'd all changed their name
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Angie told us all to. So what else in the profile? What's some low hanging profile optimization fruit that we may be missing?
There's actually quite a bit to do in terms of optimizing your profile. And it's one of the things that I like to guide people with the most because that's your entrance card. That's the way that you capture people's attention, you hook them. And that's actually how you get those people to follow you. Because when people land on your profile, if your profile isn't optimized, they're not going to convert through. So you want to have a very optimized profile in order to bring those people in and make them stay on your page. So some tips aside from the name and handle part, which I think I've already mentioned, is the bio section. Make sure that your bio is very clear on what value you're bringing to the Instagram space. You want to have some kind of sentence, short, a couple words that really describe what it is that you're doing on the platform. So for example, if you're a social media coach that's helping creators navigate the platform, then you want to be able to put that in. Or if you're somebody that's in podcasting and you want to build a podcast that talks about eco-friendly ways to optimize your home, for example, you want to put that in your bio because people are going to follow you based on the value that you provide to them. So that has to be in your bio. You also want to put a call to action. If you have a link, always make sure you're putting a link. If you've got a website, anything you want to drive people to, make sure you're putting that in your profile and make sure you're putting a call to action or a reason for people to actually click on that link. Because if you're not telling people what to do and why they should do it, they're not going to do it. So if you have, for example, a website or you have some kind of, 5 tips or a hashtag guide or something that you want to share and you want people clicking on that link, then put, a little arrow and go hashtag guide, free hashtag guide, click here, something like that. Then your story highlights. Your story highlights is another part of your bio that's a really good idea to optimize. And I talk about this a lot because they're very underused. But I always recommend having like 3 or 4 that are sort of your base story highlights. So maybe one that tells us a little bit about you. So people want to connect to the person behind the account, even if you're a brand. And this is something brands don't do enough of, but they want to know like, who are the people that work in this brand? What kind of people are they? Are they similar to me? Do we share similar values? So having an about you highlight is a really good idea. You also want to have a highlight that tells us about your brand, about your services, about, for example, your business, whatever it is that you're doing on the platform. And then you want to have a third story highlight, which is like your credibility or your social proof. Testimonials from people that have worked with you, maybe somebody saying that they had an amazing time on your podcast, sharing, all those places you've been featured. All of that is a really good idea to have in your story highlights. And those are a couple like basic tips to get started.
You're rocking my world. I'm already making my checklist of things I have to fix. It is Angie's fix list. So the story highlights, that was something that I was going to definitely ask you about because I just wonder, like, I'm like, all right, I create a lot of stories. I've always got stories going, but basically that's the organization. So if somebody's new to your profile, we want to make it easy for them to click on 2 or 3 highlight zones to find out about you, to find out about your business. So we're all podcasters mainly listening in. Should you have like, I put up video highlights in my stories of every single episode. Like, is that a place? Would that be one of the Instagram story highlights that you'd recommend so people can kind of get a feel for your show?
Yeah, definitely. I would have something even like featured guests or features or podcast simply, and have, those podcasts that you've done, preferably, tagging the people that have been in them. If you have the links to swipe up, I know a lot of accounts have lost the ability to swipe up now, but if you can provide that in there as well. They don't tend to stay in highlights though. So I would still recommend that you're making sure you've got somewhere else on your profile that people can easily access your podcast. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea because it gives people a feel of the topics that you cover, and also, incites them to reach out to you if they're interested in being featured on your podcast.
Okay. Now, next question on this. With those story highlights, do those all need to be video, or like sometimes I just post an image of my episode art or things like that? I mean, would you recommend mainly video? To me, that's if this is going to be the introduction to part of my brand, I feel like they need to be seeing something, not just like static post. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question actually, because for example, in your about you, there are different ways to do it, right? Like some people will introduce themselves by showing their face on camera, talking to the camera and telling us about you. Other people will have like images, right? And they'll share their story of who they are through text and image, and that's really a personal choice. I would say no matter whether you go the photo or the video route, because I don't think there's really a right or wrong here, you have to think about how people consume content, right? And the way that people consume content is quickly, very quickly. So if you don't capture their attention within the first 3 seconds, they're going to be skipping out of that story highlight and moving on. And you also want to make sure that it's accessible in the sense that if you are showing your face and you're talking on video, make sure you're subtitling whatever it is that you're saying. So you're putting that text in there. I actually don't like Instagram's interior like generated subtitles because they show up as you talk. And I feel like people lose patience and just X out. So I always recommend put whatever it is that you're saying in text, write it out, and then have yourself talking as well. So if people want to listen to you, they can, but if they can't listen to you, they've still got that information about you as well. So those kind of ways are ideas that I would say would work if you're planning on using video, for example, for an introduction of yourself.
Okay. Now, last question that I had on the Instagram story highlights. Most people that have those, they have it like really nicely branded images for each of the circles. Do you have any recommendations if people are like, where do I go to make an image like that? Do we go on Canva, or like where do we go to be efficient with creating those little circles that all have, you know, nice branding and color and all that stuff?
Yeah, actually, that's another really good question. First of all, if you don't already have a brand kit, it is a good idea to have one. Even if you're not using it, you know, a lot, it is a good idea to have certain colors that are associated with your personal brand, just because then when people see those colors together, or they see a certain font, or they see a certain story, they automatically go, oh man, that's Adam from, you know, Podcasting Business School.
Yeah.
You know, so they automatically have that click. And the thing is, I can tell you this because I'm a neuroscientist, right? Like our brains make connections every single day. And the more ways that you can connect people to sort of think of you when they see something, the more likely it is that they're going to be, you know, liking you, knowing you, and trusting you. So building that factor that you want to bring potential people onto your podcast, right? Yeah. So I would say that if you want to create those templates, first of all, have a brand kit, pick a couple colors that you want to work with. There's a psychology behind colors as well. If you're into that, I do recommend taking a look at it because there is a whole psychology behind the colors that are used. And I would recommend looking at them because I think they are actually very valid. And then you want to choose your colors carefully. And I normally use Canva. So Canva, in my opinion, is great. You can create, you could just take the Instagram story template. On the main page, they provide you with different sizes. Just pick the Instagram story. And then you can create your story highlight there. Just keep in mind that the dimensions are different when you put them in the little bubble. If you're putting something at the top or at the bottom, it's going to get cut off. Another good option is to use the Instagram post template because that one is maybe a little bit closer to the sizes of the story highlights, and then just create your image in there. And when you upload it to your story highlight, then it will automatically crop it into that circle shape. But keep in mind, it is a circle shape. There are also people that sell those actual templates. So you can also look into purchasing them from an independent artist, designer. There are lots of options out there to do that as well. And one more thing I wanted to add for your story highlights, make sure that you have something written underneath as well, because sometimes the fonts are really hard to read. Yep. Or, you know, people can't read because the colors are like, you got to be really careful about which fonts and colors you're pairing together. But if you've got something written at the bottom, you can ensure that everybody understands what the story highlight is about.
I'm on it, Angie. I've got these images. I've got a very like cartoonish, expressive face, and I've got, you know, like powerful eyebrows and stuff. So I've got all these like images of just my head making different expressions, and I have my branding color like kind of surrounding the circle. Like that's obviously, I use hot pink, and I just made the switch to using hot pink as like an accent color in my brand, and it makes me stand out. There's not a whole lot of guys out there like. I'm a big, like 6'4", 240-pound bald guy with tattoos. And I use hot pink in my branding. Like that kind of like, it doesn't happen a lot. So I've noticed, and I also, you mentioned just certain things that you do. Every post, I use the emojis where it'll have like fire, headphones, fire. So it's like headphones surrounded by fire. Every message when somebody DMs me, at the end of each post before I drop hashtags, it's always there. And people recognize that. People start sending me that back, and like they're recognizing it. So that's definitely, like when you talk about the neuroscience of it, that's very interesting. Now, I mentioned hashtags. I feel like that's a natural place to go next. I watch, I think you recommended, it's either you or Dimple Dang that recommended an account on Instagram that's like the creators account that has like the updates or whatever. Okay. So they talked about 3 to 5 hashtags is the new thing. Like they recommended only using 3 to 5 hashtags. What are your thoughts on this? Let's talk all things hashtags.
Awesome. I'm just going to crack my knuckles for this one. So that post got a lot, let's say it generated a lot of controversy on Instagram. Anytime anything new comes out on Instagram, everybody panics. The thing is,
it's very true.
The natural order of things on Instagram anyways, and a lot of social media platforms. So what can I say about hashtags to you, especially that 3 to 5 hashtag? First of all, why don't I touch on the creators account, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with that. So the creators account, if you go to the search bar and you type in the word creators, you will be able to find an account that's affiliated with Instagram that basically shares, different tips and tricks on how to navigate the platform. They have a lot of information relative to changes that are coming to the platform, how to best use different functions like Reels, for example. So there's actually a lot of information on the creators account that's right there in the open, and people don't know it's there. So if you're not already following it, keep that account in mind. It's a really good source of information. And I would argue that aside from the account, what's actually even more interesting is that the creators account has a blog. And if you press the link in their account bio, you can access the creators blog. And there is actually a post, I believe it was made on June 8th by the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, where he, for example, did a post that I found super informative, basically debunking and demystifying all the myths surrounding the Instagram algorithms. So it was an excellent post. And for me anyways, it cleared up a lot of things I had already sort of known, but it's different when you hear it from the head of Instagram himself. So I would recommend reading that and going through it, because I think it will help clear up a lot of questions that we have, as navigators of the platform. And then with regard to the hashtags, so when that came out, everybody panicked, oh my gosh, I have to change up my strategy all over again. What is this? So it happened. We all know it did. So what I have to say about that, first of all, just like with any change on Instagram, you have to test it out for yourself and your own account, because a lot of the time there are tips that are given out that are relevant to a very specific type of creator or a very specific type of audience. So just because somebody tells you to do something doesn't mean it's going to work for your account. So for example, the tips that I'm providing today, they're general tips, right? They're going to work for everybody, regardless of what niche you're in, what audience you have, what industry, etc. But a lot of other tips that are given out by social media coaches and gurus, and even Instagram itself, are sort of catered towards a very specific type of creator. And with the 3 to 5 hashtags, for example, I have not tried it out myself, but I have tested it on other accounts that I run. And what I'm seeing is that there's a big drop in reach, which is what I personally thought was going to happen. So for me, the 3 to 5 hashtags don't work. And the accounts that I tested this on were all between the under 1,000 range to maximum 20,000, which is about the range that most people are working with, right? So small creators. So what I think is happening with the 3 to 5 hashtags, I think 3 to 5 hashtags work when you have a big audience, a big following, and a very, very optimized reach. So when, for example, if you post a picture and that picture already has a big audience and a big following, and you've got a very, very well-defined niche, then yes, of course, you're going to still get very good reach on it. But for small creators, we can't limit ourselves with 3 to 5 hashtags, because we're cutting down 25 other opportunities that we have to get our content seen, and our reach suffers because of it. So in my personal opinion, I'm still using all 30 hashtags, which is what I have always recommended, because I will remind everyone that we had a few weeks back, they were saying to use between, I think it was 12 and 15 hashtags. So this is constantly changing, and that's why you've got to test it out for yourself. And, in a sense, find, the grain of salt within the whole story. Like, does something make sense for you? Okay, great. Test it out if you're not sure, and then see what works for you.
Okay. So the initial fear that went through my mind when I heard this, I'm on the creators account and I'm like, I'm so thankful that I'm talking to Angie next week. So the initial fear was like, are they going to penalize me for like almost like spamming people, like hashtag spamming? So you're not saying like you don't think that there's a penalty for using more than 5 hashtags algorithm wise?
At the moment, no. I mean, I've been using 30 hashtags in all my posts, and my reach of hashtags has been the same. So my hashtag reach has not suffered. In fact, I would say the post that I did a couple days ago actually did a lot better than the previous one, which happened before this supposed update. But like I always say, we never know how this is going to change down the line, which is why it's important to remember that the advice that I'm giving you today may not be applicable, a couple weeks from now. So it's something you've got to be constantly monitoring. And the other thing too, even if you do notice a drop in reach, because for example, let's say you use 30 hashtags on a post and your post didn't do well, don't automatically assume it's because you used 30 hashtags, because that happened a lot. That's happening a lot with social media content in general, is people tend to draw a parallel. They do something and they say, oh, that's what caused my post to plop. And it's like, no, there are, 15 other factors that might have caused your post to plop. And you shouldn't assign causality to one factor just because you think that's the factor that's, the one that did it. So just a word of advice on that as well. You've really got to test, and you've got to test over time, and you've got to check what kind of content performs, look at all the factors, whether it's a reel, the type of content, what time of day, is it, informative, savable, lots of other different factors that can be assigned to that as well.
Okay. Another hashtag fear of mine that keeps me up at night, Angie, is, okay, let's say I find my 30 hashtags that are my current jam, and I have them saved in like an Evernote file, and I just copy and I paste those at the end of each post, and I'm using those always for every post. Is there anything wrong with that?
Yeah, that's a really bad idea. Actually, it's a good thing you asked that, because that's like one of the biggest hashtag mistakes that people do. And if you do notice a drop in hashtag reach, normally the first question I ask you is, are you using the same hashtags over and over again? So Instagram doesn't like anything that looks remotely spam-like. So if you are always using the same hashtags over and over again, actually Instagram does see that as spammy. And what they're going to do is they're going to lower your reach on subsequent posts. So if you see a drop in reach, it might very well be because you're using the same hashtags, but not so much the number of hashtags that you're using, right? So my piece of advice is always cater your hashtags specifically to each post that you make. And that might sound super daunting, because it's like, how am I supposed to pull 30 hashtags out of my butt every time I want to make a post, right? So I have some advice on how you can better monitor that process and make it a little bit more easy and feasible for you. But my piece of advice is you can repeat some hashtags. You don't have to recycle, you don't have to remove, all 30 of them. So if you have a branded hashtag that you want to use every time you post, definitely use that. Like, I have a branded hashtag, which is Angie's Community. I use it on all my posts. It definitely has not affected my reach because I use a ton of different hashtags every time. And I also change up the order of that hashtag within my hashtag set. So what I suggest people do is write out 4 keywords that are related to your content. Keywords can be, for example, 2 keywords that are related to your niche. So for example, in my case, I consider my niche to be travel creators, as well as social media and community. Those are sort of like overarching themes, not so much niche, but overarching themes. So those 3 things, community, travel, and social media, are sort of like umbrella concepts that I use. And my profile and my posts might change, right? So you want to think about your keywords, for example, as being your location. Where are you based? Because your location is often really important, especially if you're a business or a brand, or even if you're a podcaster that's specifically targeting people in a certain state or a certain city, then your location is definitely important. So your location is one thing to keep in mind. You want to keep in mind 2 words related to your niche. So for example, in my case, travel and community. In your case, maybe podcasting and social media or marketing or something else. And then you want to have a 4th word, which can have anything to do with the picture that you posted, right? Or the image that you posted itself. And that word can change. And then there's lots of different websites that are really useful for generating hashtags. You can use, for example, displaypurposes.com. If you type in those 4 words, it will generate a full 30 hashtag set for you based off of hashtags that are, I really like that website. It's one of my favorites, displaypurposes.com. It will generate a full 30 hashtag set. And the great thing about display purposes is that you can actually change the number of hashtags that you use in each post. So if you don't want to use 30 and you want to try 15, you can type in, I just want 15, and it will generate a 15 hashtag set. And another really good feature of display purposes is that you can manually choose from their list of hashtags. So if you don't like the automatic hashtag set, or you want to have a little bit more liberty to choose the hashtags within the set, there is an option to toggle manual, and then they provide you with a list of all the top hashtags or all the hashtags that they recommend that you use. And you can just go checking and unchecking the ones that you want added within your set. So that's one really good website. Another really good website that I really like, I talk about it a lot, is hashtagslayer.com. They have a whole different way of ranking hashtags, which I think is much more comprehensive. It's my favorite way to explain hashtags to people. So hashtagslayer.com is a great tool because it actually shows you whether or not the hashtags that you use are going to be easy for you to rank on, medium, difficult. They signal whether or not hashtags are banned so that you don't accidentally use a banned hashtag. And they also signal something which is called a dead hashtag. And the great thing is that they're constantly doing updates. So I've heard now from the owner of the company that they're thinking of implementing what they call a low quality hashtag, which is a different type of hashtag that basically is more spammy or maybe is overridden with content that actually has nothing to do with what the hashtag is about and is considered to be low quality and might actually lower the reach of your post. So there's a whole hashtag. I love hashtags, by the way. I could talk about this all day.
Well, good, because I've got another hashtag question. I hear a lot about you don't want to use a giant hashtag with millions of followers because you'll get lost in the sea. Like, what if some of these like auto-generating things are giving you these 1 million, 2 million? Like, what should we shoot for? I hear under 100,000, under 1 million. Like, what's a good range for somebody that is trying to get in the hashtag game and really optimize?
See, I'm really happy that you asked this question because that actually goes right back to what I was talking about right now from Hashtag Slayer. So Hashtag Slayer is a website. You can also find them on Instagram. And the reason why I really like Hashtag Slayer is the way that they describe how hashtags work. Because up until I had, met them and learned more about their tool, I had always heard about hashtags being talked about with regard to their size or their density. So people were always talking about like, oh, you got to use the big hashtags, or you got to use the small hashtags, or you got to use hashtags with big and small. And to be honest, that actually doesn't make sense if you think about it, because what that number means, like if you have a hashtag, for example, I don't know, hashtag travel. Let's say hashtag travel has 400 million posts. So it's a big hashtag, quote unquote, right? So when you see that hashtag, what that number means is actually, it has nothing to do with size. It has to do with the history of that hashtag. So what that number is actually telling you is how many people have used that hashtag on their post. So there have been 400 million posts that were made using the hashtag travel. But it actually doesn't tell you anything about the hashtag right now. It doesn't tell you, is this hashtag popular? Is it still being used? Is it moving quickly? Is it a hashtag that I can easily rank on? Because there are 2 metrics that are important with hashtags. The first one is sort of your engagement rate relative to the engagement rate of the top posts in that hashtag. So if you get an average of like 100 likes on each post, let's say, and you want to use a hashtag that if you look at the top post section, the average is about 5,000, it's going to be very difficult for you to rank within the top post section. Not impossible, but very difficult. So you're going to want to use hashtags, for example, that maybe are easier for you to rank on. So closer to the engagement that you yourself get on your profile. I'll talk about that more in just a second. So that's the first metric. The second metric that's important to hashtags, aside from your engagement rate as compared to the average engagement rate of the hashtag, is looking at how fast that hashtag is moving. So if you go from top posts and you just go to the recent posts, you can actually get an idea of how quickly people are posting using that hashtag. So if a lot of people are posting, for example, the hashtag girl, moves very quickly. So if you make a post with the hashtag girl, it's going to be buried in the span of 60 seconds by, I'd say, 100 new posts, because it moves very fast. And that's also something to keep in mind, because it's going to make it more difficult for you to rank if a hashtag is moving faster. So those are two things that we have to think about with reference to hashtags. We have to think about our engagement rate compared to the average engagement of the hashtag. And we have to consider as well the speed at which that hashtag is moving. And what I would recommend, and this is also a strategy that Hashtag Slayer implements for you, is using like a set of hashtags that has a good mix of difficult hashtags, moderate hashtags, and easy hashtags. So if you go to hashtagslayer.com and use their tool, you will be able to find a set, for example, of easy hashtags, moderate, and difficult. The reason why we put in a couple of those difficult hashtags is because there's always a chance that you might rank on it, right? And if you manage to get your post in the top section of that hashtag, awesome. You're going to get a lot of traffic from hashtags. So it's worth a shot. But that doesn't mean that you should be using that, difficult hashtags as all the hashtags that you use. So I would say it's a more customized and catered to your personal Instagram strategy than anybody else.
Okay. So to wrap up the hashtag chat, could you walk us through, like, you're going to put up a post. What's your process look like? Like, are you going hashtag Slayer? And then, let's just walk through Angie's personal process. If you're going to put up a post and you're going to find the exact right hashtags, and then how you're going to use those.
That's a good question. So before I started using these tools, I actually have been playing around with hashtags since I started Instagram. And it's something that I'm pretty proud of, because even before these tools came out, I have gotten reach of, a couple 100,000 from hashtags alone, which is huge, because at the time I was an account that had 10,000 followers and I was getting 100,000 from hashtags alone without any kind of external help. So I think what really helped me, and I would recommend that people do this, is creating a spreadsheet where you put your keywords, because hashtags are essentially keywords, right? So you're going to list out your primary keywords, things like travel, things like podcasting, marketing, social media, community, etc. Those are like primary keywords. And then you're going to try and think of all the secondary keywords that are related to those primary keywords. So a secondary keyword is like a descriptor of your primary keyword. So for example, for travel, a secondary keyword could be solo, could be digital, could be, digital nomad, et cetera, et cetera. So that way, once you start thinking of hashtags as keywords, I think it makes the process a lot easier to work through, because we do keywording all the time, especially if you're a podcaster and you have a website, you're familiar with SEO. So you know what keywords are and you know how they work. And I think that when people start to think of hashtags in that way, they're like, oh, it's actually not that difficult. I do this every day, right? So that's my first piece of advice. So normally when I make a post, when I choose my hashtags, I actually have hashtag sets that I have generated ahead of time. I usually schedule my posts out, so I generate the hashtag sets in advance. There are some hashtags that I always use. Like I said before, my branded hashtag is a hashtag that I always use. I always use, or frequently use anyways, a couple hashtags that are related to girl travel repost accounts, because, for example, I want my post to get attention from those specific accounts. And then I actually cater my hashtags to the picture that I have. So I look at the location. Where was the picture set, right? So if my picture was taken in Ecuador, then I'm going to look through Ecuadorian hashtags, and I'm going to try and find hashtags that fall under that, strategy that I was talking about before of easy, moderate, and difficult. And that's where Hashtag Slayer comes into place. So I go into Hashtag Slayer, I type in those hashtags, I look at, because the great thing too is that Hashtag Slayer is personalizable to your own account. So it will find hashtags that work for your account and compare them to your engagement rate. So it will tell me if Ecuador is, for example, a difficult hashtag for me to use, a moderate one, or an easy one. So I create my hashtag sets ahead of time, doing just that. Like, I research them and then I create them. And to be honest, I've been doing this for a long time. So I have a lot of hashtag sets that I just have saved on my phone. Yeah. And every once in a while, I reuse that hashtag set. If it's been like 9 or 10 posts, I might change up a couple of hashtags, but I'll put in like 18 of the same ones as the one I used, 7 or 8 posts back. And the more sets that you have like generated like that, the easier the process is.
Okay. Now you mentioned scheduling your posts. What do you use to schedule your posts?
I actually use the Facebook Creator Studio. I think it's the easiest tool for me to use for posts. I will be honest though, I only schedule out posts when I cannot post them directly, because I
Okay.
actually enjoy being able to create the post by hand. I find typing in, I've heard that typing in the hashtags might be helpful. I have not so far found anything to support and discredit that, but I do like to actually prepare my posts by hand, because then I'm there to engage right away as it goes live, which is really important.
All right. Okay. So I feel like we covered hashtags. We've covered profile recommendations. Are there any other discoverability or account growth recommendations outside of that that you think that we need to be really looking at hard right now?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot in regard to growth and optimizing your profile that people can be doing better. First of all, types of content that you're using on Instagram, right? So every type of content that you use has a different potential of success on the platform. So obviously, we all know right now that short form video content is doing wonders on all of the platforms. I mean, you just got to look at Instagram, which has Reels now. You TikTok, you've got it on YouTube with YouTube Shorts. You've got it on LinkedIn now. Even Twitter has the option. So short form video content is definitely taking over social media, and it's causing a bit of a storm. And I think that just like with most of these things, you have to be very adaptable when things happen on social media. It doesn't necessarily mean straying away from being true to yourself, because some people will say, I'm not a video person. This isn't for me. But like I said at the very beginning of the live, test it out, because even the people that are shy on camera, some of them have tried Reels and fell in love with them, because it is true that the discoverability that comes from short form video content is unlike anything I have ever seen on Instagram. And I have been a full, basically part-time content creator on Instagram for the past 8 years now. So I've never seen growth the way that it's been happening on some accounts from Reels with anything else. So if you're looking for growth, definitely consider short form video content and Reels. There's lots of strategies for how to optimize your Reels, which we can get into if you're interested, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Other things that are worth keeping in mind for optimizing your profile is having a lot of different types of content, because there are people that prefer to consume posts. There are people that prefer to consume video. There are people that prefer to see a short live with you. So you've really got to gauge what your audience is looking for from you and what seems to resonate best with your audience. So, for example, I've been on Instagram for 8 years now. And what I find resonates best with my audience are posts. But that's because I generate discussion on my posts. I hold Reddit style threads on my posts, which is something that I think is fairly unique. I haven't seen anybody else doing that. But I actually encourage people to interact with each other in the comments. And that's one of the reasons why the community has grown and people have really, come onto my profile and enjoyed the space and stayed there, because they have this discussion that's very Reddit. I compare it to Reddit. It's very similar to Reddit. People come on, they like each other's comments, they comment back to other people, they can connect with other people in the comment section, something that Instagram is not really associated with, but that's happening. So you've got to also think outside of the box, right? So if something's working for you on another platform, see if you can bring it over to Instagram, tweak it a little and make it work on Instagram.
Yeah. So
those are some of the things I would say.
So with all that engagement, do you have any tips on how to get people a little more chatty underneath if we do put up like a static post and you have these amazing conversations going, how are you initiating that? How are you training your audience that this is a place to go where you can comment and I'm going to comment back and there's going to be a community conversation? How do we pull that off, Angie?
So it takes time. And that's the reason why a lot of people don't find success with these strategies, is because they're not willing to put in the time. They're not patient enough. And you have to teach people how you want them to interact with your profile. And the thing is, people are very fast learners. So you can actually teach someone to do something fairly quickly. But I think it depends on creating a habit, right? So you want to create a certain habit. You want to create certain associations that people have with your profile, because then you generate expectation as to their behavior. And then you can predict, in a sense, how they're going to behave every time they're on your profile. So the first thing, for example, with me, one of the ways that I generated this expectation or habit or whatever it is that you would like to call it with the users on my platform is that I started talking a lot about the fact that I was holding these discussions. And I would pick topics that I know people had opinions on, like Instagram is being, a pain in my butt. Anybody else feel that? Let's talk about it, right? So I would find topics that I know people have a lot to say about. And then when they would say things, I would in a sense, reward the people that left me longer and more meaningful comments by reposting them on my story. So I would take those comments and I would say, hey, this person said this, who agrees or disagrees with them? Go leave them a comment. And then if somebody, for example, liked or commented and said something meaningful on that person, then I would also take that comment and put it in my stories. So it was like a reward, like, hey, you know, if you leave me something meaningful and useful to my community, I'm going to put you up on my, you know, account, which at that point had maybe 18,000 followers, and get 18,000 eyes on your profile. And because my community has a high engagement rate, there were always people that ended up following and trickling over onto that other person's account. So it was a reward. And then they knew for next time, like, hey, if I leave something worthwhile and valuable, I have a chance to be featured on, you know, Angie's stories and get people to come over and interact with me. And because of that, like, generation of reward for good behavior, in a sense, people started to do it more and more and have these discussions. I would do the same thing on stories. I would hold on Social Sundays, I would have polls. I would poll my audience and then I would share their replies and from the story stickers. And I would, you know, ask people to vote whether or not they were in agreement or disagreement with these opinions, or say, hey, you know, I think this opinion is really good. Let's talk about it, and generate a lot of conversation that way. And it's worked, because a lot of people, like, if you scroll through some of my discussion posts, people leave full paragraphs. And the best part of it, the part that I love the most, is that aside from people leaving full paragraphs, you get other people liking and commenting back to that person as if they were having their own discussion, essentially generating community, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, I think everybody wants to grow their profile. Everybody wants to connect and find friends that have similar opinions. So this is one way that you can do that.
And all that engagement is just like algorithm love happening.
Yeah.
Like that's the cool thing.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. And like you comment back, and like it just like, wow, Angie's really commenting. I love the idea of sharing their comments in your story. Are you just screenshotting it and then kind of zooming in, tagging them, and that kind of shows them off a little bit?
What I do is I normally have some kind of story color or story template. So for example, I'll use like a plain beige background, and then I'll take a picture of their comment. I'll crop it so it's just the comment, and then I'll go to the photos, because if you create a story and you press on the options for what you can add to that story, there's an option to actually put pictures into your story. So then I will take that picture that I just created, put it in the story, and I could resize it, but then it's cropped to that specific comment, and I can, you know, write more text on the story. I can make a poll asking people to vote. So, and of course, I always tag them, because then there's a possibility that they reshare it on their profile, right? So more eyes on my content.
All right. So are you cropping that on Instagram or in another app?
I crop it in my photos. So I do it off the app, and then I directly go in and I take it from there.
Got it. Okay. Wow. Like that. It's so simple. And that's something that I feel like a lot of podcasters are missing out on, is when they're like tagging other people. Like they'll have a big guest on or whatever, and they'll put up a post and they'll be like, they didn't share my post. I'm like, well, a lot of these people have branded accounts, and like, they're just not going to do that. But then they won't go and share an image or a video clip in their story and tag them, because that's where people are. It's so easy. Add this to your story. Very shareable. And a lot of people will see those. So
exactly. And then you can stay branded too. If that's important to you, you can maintain your branded template. You can put it in the way that you want it to, and you still get that social proof, that credibility, and that potential reshare value.
Exactly. All right. Reels. We need to rewind it back and get into the reels. I love reels. Like I love acting silly. I love dancing. I love doing weird things with GIFs. Angie, are you a GIF or a GIF? Like, how do you pronounce GIF?
Oh gosh.
Is that a poll that we should put up? Maybe I'll take this clip and be like, GIF or GIF?
GIF
what team?
GIF.
That's a good vote.
I actually usually refer to it as GIF. That's the French in me. But
there you go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those debates that you don't know the answer to. Like, was it the chicken or the egg? Like, you just don't know.
What came first, the GIF or the GIF?
Exactly.
So either way, reels, obviously they're cooking, like they are awesome. But for a lot of, it seems like there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes like I'll post one and sometimes they'll be like 200 views and the next one, 14,000 views. And I'm like, what did I do? Basically the same formula. So any tips around what is seems to be consistently working with the data mind that you have with Reels.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what you just said is super important because Reels are very volatile. Like engagement from Reels is a roller coaster. And I say that because I've had Reels that hit, 50,000 and I've had Reels that hit 4,000. And it's like, I didn't do anything different. The content is more or less the same that my audience consumes. Why is one doing better than the other? So what I have noticed is that Reels engagement is much more volatile than posts. So on posts, you tend to get a similar amount of likes and comments each time, assuming that you have an engaged community and you don't have a post go viral, which does occasionally happen. But most of the time, it's pretty consistent. Reels, it's a completely different story. It's like, playing the lottery. You might hit it big and go viral, or you might, end up with one view, which is your mom. Like there's one way or the other. There's no in between. So ways that you can optimize to be, potentially viralized on Reels are the following. First of all, you want to make sure you're using trending music. And one of the resources that I recommend for trending music is called talkboard.com. So if you go to your search bar and you type in TOKBOARD, talkboard.com, Talkboard actually is wonderful because it provides you with trending music from, yes, TikTok. But we do know that a lot of the TikTok trending music right away finds its way to Instagram Reels because all the trends are coming from TikTok right now, to be honest. So most of the music that you see on Talkboard is trending on Reels as well. And what's great about Talkboard is if there's a song that you want to use, you can actually see all of the stats related to that song. You can see, for example, the number of views that it's had. You can see whether or not it's on a trend up or a trend down. So that way you can also choose more or less, am I going to be going with everybody else, with the crowd as this music soars upwards, or am I going to be catching it as it's declining, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. It also provides you with the hashtags that are associated to that trending music, which is great because then you can implement those in your hashtag strategy. It means that most of the time the music is being associated with these, keywords or these hashtags, and which locations that music is trending in, which is really, really key because it seems that location plays a really big role in Reels. We don't yet understand exactly how it works, but it's something that I've been looking at from a more data-based point of view, and I've had a bunch of creators sort of doing the same analysis on their profile, and location absolutely plays a role in your Reels. So if, for example, the topic that you're posting about is of interest to the people that are within your vicinity and your location, then it's probably going to do better than a reel that's, for example, less interesting to the people of your community or of your location, of your country. So that's something to keep in mind. And I say that because I had a reel that I posted here, and then I had the same reel posted in the country where it was taken. It was a travel reel. It did 400,000 views in the country where it was taken, and I think on here it did like 2,000. Just wasn't interesting to the people around here. In contrast, the people there were like, wow, look, we've never been there. We've got to go there. Why aren't we going there, etc. So location is definitely important, although, like I said, it can be hard to determine with all the other factors. But going back to talkboard.com, Talkboard is a really good way for you to find trending music. You can also find trending music using Spotify. So if you go to Spotify and you type in Reels 2021 or TikTok 2021, it will show you all of the viral music that's happening right now. So that's another really good way. And that one does have options for you to look just on Instagram or just at TikTok. And then another third app that I know some people use is Trend Talk. It's an application in the iPhone and App Store. I think you can get it on Android as well. I personally prefer talkboard.com, but like I said, test it out. You might prefer the app over the website. You've got to see what works best for you. So trending music is the first thing. Second thing is the content. You got to think about, your reels have to be high quality. Low quality reels get pushed down. The creator's account even said so. So high quality content. You want to make sure it's vertical. The dimensions are correct. Because if you're posting a reel and it's horizontal and you've got all that black space, that's actually considered to be low quality by Instagram. It's going to be pushed down. Your reach is going to be lower than it could be. There are ways that you could resize horizontal videos, lots of different applications and websites that you can use online. So keep that in mind. Then another thing you want to keep in mind is watermarks. You want to make sure you're not using, people talk all the time about, reposting content from other social media websites onto, for example, Instagram or Pinterest, etc. you want to make sure that when you're reposting or reusing content, that you're removing watermarks associated to those websites, because Instagram has said that anything with a watermark will have its reach pushed down. So if you're using a TikTok and you're putting it directly on your Instagram without removing that TikTok watermark, your reach may not be as good as it could be. So you can remove that watermark. There are also websites for you to do so. And you definitely want to do that. You can also remove the metadata. You can remove it using something called metafo. Metadata is like basically all of the things that are associated with that video clip. So if it was done on TikTok, it's going to have sort of like a stamp or a marker that it was created on TikTok. So if you remove the metadata, you remove that information, and Instagram no longer knows, where this video is coming from. So it strips your video of all of that like information that might give Instagram a little heads up that this wasn't created originally, right? Because Instagram prizes original content. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. So those are a couple of things that I would recommend for Reels, for optimizing your Reels.
Wow. You have dropped so much IG knowledge on us here today. With the Reel, I get asked this question quite a bit. Should we or should we not share the Reel into our story? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I always do it, to be honest, because the truth is that actually something, I'll talk about this in just a second, but you never know how many people are actually seeing your content on their home page. So if you have a really good engagement rate and really good reach, then that's great. But most of the time, 80% of our following is not even seeing our content. So if you put it on stories, you might be hitting people that didn't see it on their homepage. So I always recommend putting it on your stories, telling people you posted something. The one thing I would say is don't just repost it on your stories without putting anything else. The reason why I say that is because Instagram prizes original content. I just said that. So if you're just taking and reposting pictures, it's not of interest to anybody, first of all. And second of all, Instagram is actually going to push it down. So you want to make sure that aside from reposting it on your stories, you're adding a poll or you're adding some kind of sticker or you're writing some text or you're encouraging people to click through, but you're doing something else that makes that content more engage worthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've often thought that where you spice it up. Like it's a great opportunity to get some engagement with a poll or with a quiz or with something. Like I do a lot of weird reels where I've got this blue disco suit and I've got white disco shoes and I'm dancing around and doing all my things, but you can add a little engagement factor as I'm acting like a buffoon up there when I reshare it into the reel, or into the story. All right, Angie, this has been amazing. I want to be respectful of your time. I feel like we've packed 2 hours worth of IG knowledge into this 1 hour episode here. I want to make sure that we reserve a little time for you to promote yourself, what you've got going on, where people can find you, all that stuff. You've delivered so much knowledge. I'm a huge fan of everything that you're doing, everything that you're teaching. So where can people dive into the world of Angie?
Thanks, Adam. The feeling is mutual. If you want to connect with me, the easiest way to do so is Instagram. That's sort of where I live and spend most of my days. So Instagram is the best place to connect. It's at Where Is Angie with 2 E's. That's the best place you can reach out to me. My DMs are always open, especially if you have social media questions. I actually host Social Sundays on my Instagram, which is basically one day of the week. So on Sundays, I hold discussions related to social media. So we talk all about, one topic. It could be hashtags, it could be reels, it could be reach, it could be followers, your data download, etc. All of that, we cover it on Social Sundays. So it's a really good place for you to interact and meet people because, like I said, the community factor is really important to me. And aside from that, we host a lot of lives, also social media related, but also having to do with travel. So if you're an avid traveler, we do host a lot of lives about, for example, pitching, how to pitch yourself to brands, how to pitch yourself to hotels, how to monetize your content. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, my Instagram is definitely the place to go. And it's got my email there. So you can always reach out to me through email as well. And of course, I'm on Clubhouse because that's how we met, you and I. And I'm currently trying it out on TikTok. I just got a video with 2.1 million views. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Nice. Well done. Well done, Angie. Well, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, like I said. And I love that you're willing to experiment, but you're also very data driven. And I can tell that you're like, all right, what's working, what's not. And
Oh
then
yeah.
you share it all, everything that you learn with us. So I don't have to be the neuroscientist, data driven mind. You can be that person.
Exactly.
And then you just share the best part. So Angie, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for investing some time with us here today on Podcasting Business School.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Pod Pals, lots of IG. I know you may be on like IG overwhelm right now. So here's my personal game plan. I'm going to re-listen to the episode. I'm going to make my list of my Instagram overhaul, like little things that I want to change or update or get better at according to what Angie has said. And I'm going to keep that list in like an Evernote. But the first thing is like the first domino has to fall. So we have to decide what's that first thing that I'm going to take action on. So focus on that. You've got the list, so you don't have the fear of missing out anymore. And then what's the first thing that you want to take action on? Don't let all of it overwhelm you, because I know that you guys are like, I need to do all the things and all at once. What is it going to be? A hashtag change up? Maybe the Instagram story highlight. Maybe you change your name in your profile. What's that first thing? Just do that one first step, flick over that first domino, create momentum, and then go to the next step. All right, Pod Pals. As always, I'm going to send you out into the world, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We will see you on the next episode.